So today we're talking about the open source. The item open source refers to something people can modify and share because its design is publicly and accessible. The term originated in the context of software development to designate a specific approach to create computer program. Today, however, open source designates a broader set of the values, what became the open source way. Open source project, product, or initiatives embrace and celebrates principles of the open exchange, collaborative participation, report, property, and transparencies, and community-oriented development. So, what is open source? The open source software is a software with a source code that anyone can inspect, modify, and enhance. Source code is the part of the software the most computer users don't ever see. It's a code computer programmer can manipulate to change how the piece of the software, a program or application works. Programmers who have access to the computer program source code can improve that program by adding the features to it or fixes the part that don't always work correctly. So, what's the difference between the open source software and another type of the software? Some software has the source code that only the person, team, or organization who created it and maintains exclusive control over it can modify. People can call this kind of the software proprietary or closed source. Open source is different. It's the make source code available to the who like to view that code, copy it and learn from it, alter it or share it. As they do, the proprietary software user must accept the term of the license when they use open source software, but the legal terms of the open source license differ dramatically from those of the property license. So it's different because it's open and it can share, and you also can learn something from it. And why open source is so important? The open source is a type of the licensing argument that allows the user to freely modify the work, use set of work in the new ways, and is work into the large project or drive a new work based on the original by removing boundary between the individual. Open source promotes a free exchange of ideas within the community to drive creative, scientific, and technological advancement. And why do people prefer to using the open source software? The people prefer open source software to the proprietary software for a number of the reasons, including control, training, security, and stability. The control is talking about many people prefer the open source software because they have more control over the kind of the software. They can examine the code to make sure it's not doing anything they don't want to do, and they can exchange part of they don't like. Users who are not programmers also benefit from open source software because they can use this software from the many proposed they wish. And training. Other people like open source software because it helped them become the better programmer. Because open source code is the public accessible, students can easily study from it. Security. Some people prefer open source software because they consider it more secure and stable than the proprietary software. Stability. Many users prefer open source software to the proprietary software for important long-term projects because the programmer publicly distributes the source code. For open source software, users relying on the software for critical testings can be sure the tools won't disappear or fall into the disappear if their original creator stop working on them. And next one, why open source? The idea of the open source stems from the technological community from the earliest day of the computers. Programmers and engineers developed new technologies through the collaboration. For instance, a programmer in the San Jose developed a new application, then other programmer in the Singapore studied the application and discovered a way to improve it. The knowledge is the share, and the entire community benefit from the collective innovation. In a many ways, the creation of the open source license was the direct response to the proprietary manufacturing, the not-for-profit open source Intivate was founded in 1998, is to administer open source license around the world, promotes open source development, community and education initiatives, and gift conference. And what is the open source circle? Many people believe that to create an open source product means give the product away for free. While the many open source applications are free, developers and entitled to sell their work to the public. However, the license dictates that they are not allowed to copyright or patent the derivatives work or keep any part of the code secured. And the internet is the open source. Internet source is talking about the fundamental function of the internet are built on the open source technologies. The Linux operating system regulates the operation of the web service and the approach web service application negotiates data transfer between the worldwide service infrastructure and the person device. Countless the internet applications are also open source. Large internet companies like the Facebook, Google, they have to open up some of their proprietary innovations to the open source community. And open source community disseminating the technological improve the experiences for all users by creating efficiencies and making the entire internet more streamlined, and open source movement is the reason that technological has developed at such as the breakneck pace for the past few decided. And the TensorFlow. This is an open source the machine learning from the framework for data flow programming developed by the Google Brain team back in the 2015. TensorFlow has been gaining a lot of the traction in the recent months, raising interest in the deep learning and the neural networking. As a core, it enables programmer to deploy computation to the one or more CPUs or GPUs in the desktop, server or mobile device without rewriting the code, and this is used by the Google for speech recognition, language translation, photo search functionality, and multiple other purposes. And another one is the Visuals. Visuals is seen as the universal, considered to be the one of the most prominent JavaScript framework on the market, and it is the GitHub page has the racked up over the 900 stars, and couldn't possibility not mention Visuals. This is the ticket a lot of the boxes and used for the virtual DOM for better performance, and incorporates directive rendering, but it makes the particularly exciting is that it supports the component basis approach of the building web application. And this one is an open source and called JavaScript library for the creating the web components, which are then used to build a web page and apps. Playmore is the correct being developed by the Google developer and a contributor on the GitHub. And this one is the Hyperledger. Hyperledger is different from other inclusions in this list. It is the sense is more of the hub for the open industrial blockchain development than an individual project, with the multiple framework and tools consulting it. While the umbrella project, it was started by the Lux Foundation. Several leading tech companies, including the Internet and the IBM, have the greatly contributed to its development and the creation of the individual Hyperledger framework. Hyperledger is therefore the host of the Virus project, of which Hyperledger framework is probably the most well documented. Led by the IBM, the project aims to be the plug-and-play solution to the quickly build blockchain application for the enterprise and give developers the tools required to build applications that enable the creation of the business network model. They will participate and transact and exchange assets in the real life. And this one is the Kubernetes. Kubernetes, according to the Googler who installed designed it, Kubernetes is the portable, extensible open source platform for the managing considers workload and service that facilitate both deliberative configuration and automation. But simply, Kubernetes allows programmers to easily to efficiently manage their life cycle of the container application while the cluster of the nodes. The blend of the exception engager Google's willingness to let others take over and the passionate community is what makes Kubernetes such as the impressive open source project. And this one is Heaven. This is a well-established market for diagonal security, safeguarding sensitive data in the transit at rest, monitor network traffic and analyze or molecular activities, and secure endpoint devices are the all area rife with the customer solution meet whatever your digital security needs may be. But there's remaining the dry gap in the use of the technological to protect the people and the environment surrounding and endpoint devices, and the consequences can be served for the journalists, human rights defense officers, and the civilians traveling the world and yielding their personal security for something greater. And this is a Predator. Predator is the self-described operation code from the goal and ending conflict among the development group of Reserve. The IDE formatting was by standardized and representation of the code regulars with how it regulation construct and upload. And about all of this is important to mention that in mitigate which switch from the proprietary software development to the open source development would not be a wise decision, and the changes concept are massive, and the primarily adopting this word would be likely impact negative on the economic in the short term. Rather, guarding adoption to the open source development is recommended. So the open source is very important for this world, and it will help lots of and to push this social development and help people development and economic development.